Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here today. Today, we are going to be discussing a very interesting study in regards to how the sound mind it shares neural structures in linguistic tasks as well as musical tasks. So, specifically, here we are looking at, do early music training and bilingualism impact the accuracy of prosodic discrimination? So the exact title of the study was Children's Early Bilingualism and Musical Training Influence Prosodic Discrimination of Sentences in an Unknown Language. So this study was really interesting because it basically just aimed to see if kids who were either bilingual or who had experienced musical training from an early age had an advantage over their monolingual or non-musical counterparts in detecting the rhythmic differences in speech, which are characteristic of our language. That's just kind of a little overview. It was done in Slovenia. It's a Slovenian study, which is really, really cool. And it was published by the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. This was relevant and very pertinent to me because I remember really being fascinated by the segment on bilingualism and music training, and also fascinated by how like the sound mind itself really affects and shares a lot of the same pathways with other cognitive processes, and that music training can actually help with things like memory retrieval, prevent cognitive decline, and it's really just fascinating to dive into with more depth the actual ways in which music training can increase our sensitivity for other cognitive tasks. So, as a bilingual myself, who also started learning music at an early age, this study seemed relevant and pertinent, and I wanted to kind of take a deeper stab into how the brain works in response to music training and speaking two languages. Okay, so we already know that music cognition and linguistic learning do share similar neural structures, and this is really interesting because language involves a lot of sonic qualities, obviously, because we need to be able to hear each other in order to understand each other. That's why when the dishwasher is running, or you're in a crowded concert venue with lots of noise, it's really difficult to hold conversation. So really, that noise can impact our ability to understand each other. And something that was interesting about the lessons was that it's not just physical or external noise, it's also neural noise. And increased just kind of exposure and understanding of sonic organization through things like music training can help reduce the level of neural noise within our brains, and therefore help us think with more clarity, which is amazing because language is also involved and has things like timing ingredients involved, pre-voicing, oral and active adjustment of the fundamental frequency, etc. So basically, in order to speak a language, you have to be able to cadence the words out correctly, because obviously if I say water bottle, it's different than water bottle. The syllable stresses, do impact the meaning and understanding of the words a lot. Because I could say water bottle, and you might kind of get the context of what I'm saying, but you would have to try a lot harder, and it just would be weird. So the other thing is pre-voicing. So for example, if I am going to say pill versus bill, there's a very small, just millisecond kind of pre-voicing that my mouth does before I even utter the word, in which I know what's coming, so my lips prepare to make a b or a p, which is a very, very small adjustment. So, of course, this impacts pronunciation. Our ability to pre-understand the sounds that are coming can help us pronounce certain words better, which can also be a cool tactic to apply to a new language when you're trying to reduce the amount of noticeable accent that you have, for example. And also, different languages are spoken with different fundamental frequencies, which means that if I'm speaking Spanish, for example, I think I tend to have a higher voice hablo por aquí enfrente, it's a brighter sound, so my voice tends to be higher than when I speak English, which has a lot fewer bright vowels, so therefore the fundamental frequency of English, I believe, based on that, would probably be a little bit lower. So when people speak multiple languages, they have to kind of have a broader range of understanding of this fundamental frequency, which can help them hear more nuances, especially in tonal languages such as Chinese. And all of this boils down to linguistic prosody, which is what this particular study was focusing on, which of course is a big definition in itself. So let's get more into what prosody is. Okay, prosody, which you might, if you've taken a songwriting class at Berkeley, you might have heard this applied to the songwriting curriculum's context. And in songwriting curriculum context, prosody has to do with an artist's unique ability to express themselves based on their personal quirks. So in language, it's kind of the same thing. So, but in a rhythmic kind of way, it's the rhythm, stress, intonation of speech that help us make sense of our of language. So again, let's go back to an example. If I say able versus able, it's very similar, and what I stress kind of really affects what I'm saying. If I say he's able, like that gospel song, he's able, then I'm stressing the A, able, and the bull is kind of, the schwa is just kind of rolls into the L, so able, sorry, versus a bull or a bull, and he's a bull. Okay, that's very different than saying he's able. So again, what am I stressing? That really can determine and change the entire meaning of a sentence. And when you don't have cues such as, for example, when you're not reading, when you're in conversation, you have to be much more attuned to these prosodic cues in a language in order to be able to understand, because conversation is really a lot more rhythmic than we think. Even going back to rhythmic entrainment, we are literally kind of coming into rhythmic alignment with the people that we are conversing with. Even just walking with someone, you tend to kind of adjust to the same pace. So when you're speaking a language, it's really important to adjust to the common pace of that language and the rhythmic syntax of it, so that we can understand and accurately communicate within that language. Because communication is more than just what you're saying, it's how you say it, as we know. Even just if it's a common sentence with prosodic understanding, like if I say, that was great versus that was great, like even just how you say things really impacts how it's interpreted. So prosody, learning a new language is very, very important. Okay, so let's get really into the meat and potatoes of this particular study. I've done a lot of talking and I'm going to get more specific right now. So this is the main question that was asked, right? So do early music training in bilingualism affect children's discernment of subtle prosodic differences in otherwise phonetically similar sentences in a foreign language? Okay, what does that mean? Okay, so in other words, do the neural structures involved in bilingualism and music training impact language learning abilities by increasing our sensitivity to the acoustic rhythmic cues of everyday spoken language? So basically what this would mean, if it were true, was can we encode a language, especially in terms of pronunciation, without fully understanding it? Like, does being bilingual or being trained in music help us to kind of get the hang of a new language just by understanding its rhythmic qualities? Okay, so why is this important? Like, why would this actually matter? So this is important because it really can dive more into how the sound mind informs our cognitive processes, in this case, communication and linguistic growth. It also really highlights the role of acoustic salience in language acquisition. So the defining sound ingredients of speech, the noticeable ones. For example, I think that we tend to notice in French, for example, it's a much more kind of guttural language with different kinds of syllables. Like it's like la pluie, bonjour. Like it has a lot more kind of throat action happening than English. And So those are just examples of acoustic salience. Or German, for example, also has like a lot of Achlaut. So those are qualities of languages that kind of give it its identity. And so the main question here, so if this is all you get from this, is acoustic salience more important than grammatical cues in achieving linguistic fluency? So is it more important to be kind of attuned to these characteristics of speech than it is to actually understand the grammar of it in order to be able to communicate? Well, let's find out. So okay, let's see. The method. Okay, so in order to test this question, the scientists who were based in Slovenia, they accrued a group of 108 students between the ages of 6 and 8 years old, and they divided them into 4 groups, which we'll get more into later. They used a computer-generated same different discrimination task to determine this question, in which they introduced 2 prosodically different but phonetically identical sentences in a language that was foreign to these children. So none of them spoke French, and these 2 sentences were in French. Okay, so all of the children spoke Slovenian as their main language, and they all spoke a different language as well, ranging from Russian, Spanish, mostly European languages, but none of them spoke French. So this was relevant, of course, because both of these sentences that I'm going to go into now are in French. So the sentences that were used have slightly different meanings, although they kind of sound the same. So the order of syntactic structure was noun condition and verb condition for the first sentence, and for the second one, it was verb condition and then noun condition first. So this is important because for noun condition first, it puts the subject first and then the action second. So you can kind of tell that determines like just kind of what is emphasized. So the subject being like the meat and potatoes of the sentence, that means that like you're probably going to focus more on the beginning of the sentence in sentence 1 versus the end of it in sentence 2. So sentence 1 was le jeune garde la voit. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it means the young guard sees her. Le jeune garde la voit. So le jeune garde being the noun condition and sees her, la voit being the verb. So in sentence 2, it's le jeune garde la voie. So the young man guards the road. So le jeune, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. I'm sorry if anyone speaks French, but can also mean the young man, even though it also just means young. So it's like in Spanish, joven can mean young person, or it can mean young. So the young man guards the road. So of course, these 2 sentences mean completely different things, although they kind of sound the same. So where you put the stress is going to really determine whether, like, your ability to understand what's being said. Okay, so let's go into the participants. Okay, so the Slovenian children, there were 108, and they were divided into 4 groups. And these groups were bilingual musicians, monolingual musicians, bilingual non-musicians, and monolingual non-musicians, which was the control group. They were taken to a quiet space in a school setting, and they were asked to listen to sentence pairs in French in a randomized order. So every child got a different order and different sentence, but they heard sentences in different orders, and they would mix in, like, sometimes it would be different sentences, sometimes it'd be the same sentence, just to see like if they would actually like pick up on the fact that it was different. So they were given 2 options. They were asked to indicate whether the 2 sentences that they heard were the same or different. So they had to click the corresponding button so they would hear both and indicate same or different. And yeah, the key was to focus on the analysis and duration of pitch on the phonetic segments. So yeah, it basically, they were just trying to see how sensitive they were to these subtle kind of pitch durations. So the findings were interesting, but can leave a lot of room for growth. Basically, it was surmised that You can see here on this figure that there was a big noticeable gap between monolingual non-musicians, the controls, and all the rest of the group. So basically, musicians and bilinguals both significantly outperformed their monolingual non-musician counterparts. Musicians overall show a faster reaction time tendency, as you see here, musicians and bilinguals. The monolingual musicians is ever so slightly, just by a tiny fraction of a millisecond, it greater than the bilingual non-musicians. So really, it wasn't a great enough gap or between the two to really like hold any weight. Therefore, even though it was proved that being bilingual or having music training respectively can really impact a child's ability to, discern these prosodic differences over monolingual non-musicians, it really didn't show that there was any additive effect between being bilingual non-musician and just being a bilingual musician. So like there wasn't really a cumulative effect between the two factors. Like if you were a bilingual musician, you didn't have a significant advantage over someone who's just bilingual, for example. So more research would have to be done on that to determine if, there are other additive effects, but here there really isn't. So response biases also were accounted for. They calculated like the mean response time and factored in the possibility of, false alarm trends. So these statistics were very, very mathematically attained. Okay, so the monolingual non-musician group, despite being completely, like significantly below the other two, did display above chance probability. So they did they had a 53.6% accuracy score, which is above average. So it wasn't like they were just guessing correctly. So that's good. It shows that we have the capacity to train that. They could probably improve that if they learned another language or started studying music. The conclusions of this study were that just kind of reinforced that music training increases pitch sensitivity to the FF, the fundamental frequency, and that it does improve dexterity in pitch perception tasks. So it just kind of reinforces what we kind of already knew about the fact that both of these different skills really do affect the sound mind, and that can kind of sharpen your brain to new skills. It expands upon previous studies. This pitch perception skill holds across entirely divergent and non-contextualized prosodic cues. So it just kind of deepens the knowledge of the above bullet point, because it basically shows that it's not just about pitch. Like this increased sensitivity to sound also holds across like rhythmic things. So prosody, it's not just pitched. It also has to do with how we perceive the cadence of things, be that speech, be that music, So it reinforces that linguistic and musical tasks share neural structures, of course, as we've been saying. And, And it suggests that bilinguals and musicians might have an advantage in learning a new language, especially in being accurate with things like pronunciation. I don't know about like actually learning the language, but definitely when it comes to pronouncing it, there might be a small advantage. So yeah, that's what they got out of that study. But of course, this leads us to a lot of other questions. So do the neural processes enhanced by musicianship, such as memory retrieval, really give them an advantage in learning languages over non-musicians? So like how big is the actual benefit of being bilingual, or what is the actual benefit of being a musician? Like, can you actually learn a language more effectively if you are a musician versus not? Like, do the other neural processes that are enhanced by musical training, such as memory, also like pertain to language acquisition over like the course of actually learning a whole language, not just the prosody, not just the grammar, but can it actually affect the speed and the efficiency with which you can actually speak the language with fluency? And then I just know this study did not reflect any additive effect between being bilingual and being a musician over their ability to, discern prosodic cues. So the bilingual musicians didn't have a big advantage over just bilingual or just the musicians. So I'm wondering if there are other kind of like spheres in which there is an additive effect, whether if you are bilingual and a musician, if that does like kind of have a joint impact on your ability to learn a new skill. I don't know. There wasn't any proof of that here. Could there be proof of that in other spheres? And then if it is true that our ability to learn is enhanced by being bilingual or by playing an instrument, should these things become more emphasized in school? I feel like the arts and language is always like looked at as an elective. But if these things can actually help many other cognitive processes, and there were more studies done in terms of the sound mind and how it affects our ability to learn and retain information, then wouldn't it be an investment to have our children maybe explore more of these artistic and linguistic realms in order to just improve their overall time in school? Yeah, it would be an interesting thing to continue to look into. The sound mind seems to have a lot of amazing umbrella overreach over a lot of other neural processes, and it would be really, really interesting to see if this was emphasized in school, how much better would we be able to learn? Would it be significant, or would it really not make a huge difference? Yeah, so ultimately, this study was very interesting, not so much in necessarily proving or new information, but it reinforced a lot of really important information, and it opens the door for a lot of interesting research questions. Thank you for watching and being here during my presentation. I hope you found this interesting, and this course was amazing. I hope everybody learned something really cool. I have been enjoying watching everybody else's presentations as well, and it's been an honor to be part of this course. Thank you very much.